it a few seconds. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Fitchburg Police and Fire Commission. The hour of 4:30 already being achieved, being 4:35, I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is Tom Thorson, the president of the commission, and we are doing this meeting virtually just because of COVID-19, and we want to make sure everyone is safe, and we do social distancing. So I think, let's see, we've got present Jeff Standiford, Jim Wheeler, Rosa, and Bronwyn Baldwin. So we've got a quorum, and the meeting is called to order. The second order of business will be approval of minutes. It'll be from our I believe February meeting. Is there a motion? Rosa moves to approve. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, Jim seconds. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's the minutes. Let's see, gotta make sure I get the current agenda. The next order of business will be, are there any, Sarah, did anyone send any appearances or things for the non-agenda wanting to appear?
We have no public appearances and no non-agenda items.
Okay. Then the next order of business will be number 4, which is the report from the police department, staffing report. Chief Brecklin.
I'm going to share my screen just so that you can see the report, okay? So one moment, please. All right, let's see, which one are we looking at? Looks like this is the most recent one, Chad. Do you want me to open up the older one? So we've got 2 staffing reports. We have a March one and an April, or
There's
February
no
and March one.
There's no change, Sarah, so this one will be fine.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you, though. Good afternoon, everyone. We're starting to get the hang of these remote meetings, that's for sure. Unfortunately, we're getting the hang of them due to the circumstances. But my staffing report is attached, and you'll note that we are currently without any vacancies in the police department as far as full-time staff goes. We have 3 officers in field training, 1 at the academy, which had been suspended for probably at least 3 weeks during the month of March. Due to COVID-19, so we had our officer Olivia Munson back with us for that period of time, and from a timing perspective, it worked out really nice for the clerk's office because she spent a couple of weeks with the clerk's office processing absentee ballot requests and returns. The clerk's office had done an all-call for assistance, and we were fortunate to be able to provide Olivia to them for a while. She has since begun a restart of the academy. They're doing some virtual lessons right now. That started last week, and they're going to continue to monitor the situation until the point in time where they can bring the students back together to obviously complete the hands-on portions of the academy. So as you all know, no aspect of policing is unaffected by this either. Much like in our community, there is no one who is untouched by this situation. And we do have 1 person on leave, and that leaves obviously a total when you add all 3 of those categories up for a total of 5 patrol positions that are currently unfilled. Any questions regarding the staffing of the police department?
No, this is Tom. I appreciate, I think you've put out some good positive messages about how the police department is, basically handling service during this time. So that's greatly appreciated.
Thank you. We're trying to obviously keep the community informed of service modifications, and of course our social media personality, Lieutenant Ned Hartwick, is always behind the scenes there on those things that are going out to the community.
Okay, do any of the commissioners have any questions on staffing? And I would, does it look like you may have anything next month, Chief Brecklin?
Are you referring to personnel?
Yes.
I don't know at this point in time. It's possible.
Okay. Okay. We'll obviously have to wait and see. I'm just trying to, plan ahead. This is our first one, but we may, middle of next May, we may be having this too. Who knows?
By-day proposition as staffing goes.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that report. If there's no other questions for the police chief, the next item will be the report from the fire department. Chief? Joe?
Just unmuting my mic. A lot of stuff going on here at the fire station. I know that Sarah's got a staffing report that we provided last month. We also had an update for this month. Not much has changed other than the calls for service have obviously been updated. Once again, just going back to the format on this form, it was set up so that we could share it not only between the Police and Fire Commission, but also the council, who appreciates regular updates. One of the things that we can tell you is, although COVID is obviously first and foremost on our minds, our call volume has actually gone down a little bit. Our preparation has gone up, but our call volume has gone down as a result of some of the activities that we would typically see this time of year. We're not. What we're conscientious of is the prevailing potential of cascading factors when we have people who are living with each other for an extended period of time without an appropriate outlet. We're not exactly sure where that's going to go. So we're just keeping our eyes open as far as the potential for calls over the next month or so. We don't necessarily see the exact end in sight for Safer at Home being suspended. So the reason I share that with you is it obviously has an impact somewhat on how we are able to carry out our day-to-day. Right now, we are going to be coming to you in closed session to present 4 paid-on-call candidates and 3 intern candidates for approval. So those vacancies will be filled accordingly. Once again, our numbers are consistent. We see people leaving our paid-on-call ranks as soon as we see people entering our paid-on-call ranks, and a lot of that just has to do with the rotation of people actually getting jobs and moving on to other opportunities. So that said, all of that is somewhat consistent. The fire department, along with other municipal departments, has been involved with the emergency management effort. The Emergency Operations Center, which is now located at Fire Station Number 1, has been stood up. We aren't necessarily staffing it as a city, but we do have Dane County representatives in the EOC. It is their backup, and that provides not only the city some value, but also obviously the county. And then another note that Sarah can speak to in greater detail, but she has worked very hard on trying to address the Family First initiative, the COVID emergency. Basically, it's the sick policy associated with isolation and quarantine, and if you have to treat family members at home. So all of that was passed by the council last night, and the good news is most departments across the board, even our emergency responders, are represented. Their sick leave reflects most of their 2-week quarantine period. So most of what we're doing in the station is modified as a result of the virus and trying to minimize our exposure and potential for cross-contamination. The numbers are still going up countywide for COVID. They are tapering off a bit, but they are not going down yet. So we will continue to do our social distancing measures. We have upgraded our cleaning policies and procedures inside the fire station, and we've restricted access into the stations as well, just to address some of those concerns. So with that, that gives you an idea of where we're at with our existing personnel. From a demographic profile, things are obviously the same right now because we haven't added anybody, and we're about to talk about that in closed session.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief Pavlmacher. Do any of the commissioners have any questions on the staffing report? Okay, if none, then the next order of business would be to go into closed session to talk about those sensitive personnel issues. Would somebody make a motion with the statute to go into closed session, and then we'll vote on it? Rosa? Okay, or does somebody else want to make the motion?
I'll
Okay.
make it.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Okay, pursuant to section 19.85, parent 1, parent C, Wisconsin statutes, the commission will move into closed session for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, more specifically to discuss the hiring recommendations for paid on-call firefighters and fire science interns.
Okay, that's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and I'm sorry, was that Jeff?
He was.
Okay, I thought, and then I think we need to voice affirmatively and raise our hands so we got a good record that we all in favor signify by saying aye and raise hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think we got that covered. Okay, we go into closed session. So Sarah. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We were in closed session pursuant to the statute, and we've now voted to go back into open session. And based on the discussion that happened in closed session, is there a motion to take action?
There is.
Okay, Rosa?
I move that we accept the recommendation of the fire chief to hire the top 4 finalists for the position of paid on-call firefighter to begin as soon as permissible.
Based on the COVID-19 situation. Okay, there's that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, James, second. Okay, all in favor, any discussion? Okay, if not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
It passes. Okay, is there another motion?
There is. I move that we accept the recommendation of the fire chief to hire the top 3 candidates for the position of interns to begin probably in the middle of June.
Okay, anytime after June 1st. Recommend the motion. Okay, is there a second?
Yes, I second.
Okay, Jeff seconds. Okay, any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Okay, now we have, the next item is item number 6, which is discussion of input for the draft PFC rules and regulations update. As you know, we, just as a kind of catch us all up to speed, we had worked on this, and I think at our February meeting, we almost kind of said, you know what, we need to go into more detail and get, this so that it can be read for both the commissioners and the other people. And so I believe Rosa did some work, and we really appreciate it, Rosa. She came up with a new draft. I think the idea today is to kind of go as far as we can and then maybe adjourn by 6, just because I think we'll be kind of burned out by then on the issue. Hopefully it'll be interesting to see what comments, but let's go ahead and start with the beginning. Sarah, do you want to pull that screen up?
I have a question. Everybody had a chance to review it?
I know I did. Anybody,
Yes.
everybody else?
I did.
Okay, Jeff?
I reviewed it.
Yep, I looked it over.
Okay, great. Okay. So, why don't we take it by, we'll just kind of go right down and suggested changes, people, Sarah's gonna, I think, type or at least capture so that we can come back, later with whatever changes we have. Anything on the Fitchburg PFC rules and regulations revised? Anybody want any changes there? I thought it might be a good idea to have the date recognized so that we kind of know that, okay, this is where we're at as of
Or 15?
April 15th, and maybe market draft. Anything on purpose? Anybody have any comments? Okay, if not, the mission, does anybody have any additional comments on mission? Okay. The only thing, I was just on the mission. I didn't know if we need to reinforce a little bit more on the workforce that reflects the community serve and live in. I'm just looking at my own comments. We can go on the next. Do people like the idea to clarify that we don't have the authority to do the day-to-day? That's a different. I think it does help to spell that out.
I agree with that, Tom. I think that needs to be said.
I
Right.
do.
It's not the city of Milwaukee or Madison.
Right, and I agree with that. Should we call it optional powers like it does in the statutes and how it's referenced in the manual? Or, I guess, it's kind of six to one,
I think that's a good idea. Because that does then reference to that.
So if we could just make a reference in there to, we do not have optional powers based on statute. And then the rest of it, I thought the verbiage was fine, but.
Okay. Anyone have any comments on scope?
Before we move on to that, I would probably include the statutory section. If you're saying based on statute, did you have a statutory section, Jeff, that you can recall or no?
I don't know what exactly it is for optional powers.
It's listed in the book.
Yeah, it
I don't
is.
have it in front of me. I think to save a little time, we'll look it up in the book and then put that statute in.
Just seeing if I can find it offhand.
No worries, Jeff. I can look that up.
Okay.
It is in the book. It's on page 7.
Okay, thanks.
Is there anything on scope?
Wait, Tom, what about this? Include the definition of second-class city by population, which limits the scope and admin duties. Is that not the same? Or is that something separate that we should? I'm not sure what this means exactly, but.
I just put it there because there's a difference, and I thought maybe to clarify, but it's.
Gotcha.
It may be just something where we go to the book again and put that clarification in. I think Milwaukee, I'm trying to think if Madison and Milwaukee might be the only, class 1 cities, I think.
Okay.
I know Milwaukee is for sure. there's a population number that hits that mark.
Right.
Okay.
I do think that both of those paragraphs, though, encompass the same concept. So I think it could just be one, right? So it could say something like Fitchburg, the commission does not have we don't have optional powers in the city of Fitchburg. And then list off, that means we don't have day-to-day operational control over the police and fire departments.
Okay,
Okay.
good call. Anything else on scope on that first page?
Let's scroll down here.
Okay, number 2, administration meetings.
I just had a comment on there. So we jumped right to section 2. Is there a section 1? Or is that just not included in this document, or?
Good catch.
Okay, Rosa?
I just follow the format of the original one. There's no good reason for it.
Okay.
They just went from scope to 2, so I'm assuming the first page is 1, so that's gonna be changed.
Yeah, I'm looking at the current old one, and it lists under section 1, scope and authority definitions. So maybe
That's what's missing. Yeah.
Yep. So I think that's where we may just go back to what we put on the other page and put that as section 1 and go right back into section 2 then.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Everybody think it's a good idea to list that we meet usually the 3rd Wednesday of the month at 4:30?
I'm concerned about getting that specific in the handbook because, like we just changed that recently. So, and I don't think the law really requires us to be that specific in the handbook. Those are just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I guess I added an edit to remove that specific time frame because I think what we had talked about before was adding something referencing the website or so I wrote a line in there and we can certainly change it, but meeting times and agendas are available on the City of Fitchburg's website. So we post those things on a regular basis. Those are available to the public. If we just make reference to that, we meet at regular times, you guys can go out there and see exactly when we meet. Because they can change and they do change, like we didn't have one last month and,
Sure. I'm fine with that. Everybody else? Okay. Let's see, 2-3. Fine.
Mhm.
And I think it probably is good to shall be elected, but because it's required by statute. So, and that actually, if we have a meeting next month, which I assume we may do virtual, it should be in May. Okay. 2-5. Okay, that gets more specific, so that's good.
One moment.
The one word, I don't know if it was, I think it might have been on mine, under 2-6, in absence, I might see a chance, I don't think this would happen, but it'd be good to have there in their absence. There may be a time that the president might have to recuse themselves on an issue, so they're in their absence or recusal.
Sure. I don't think it hurts adding that.
Mm-hmm. If for some reason there was some action and there was a relationship that, somebody might question your impartiality, then you might want to do it.
Under the president shall, the first bullet point needs to be ENSURE to ensure that regular meetings.
Sure. Good catch. Okay, then under 2.7. That's you, Sarah. I'm glad you're okay with that.
Sorry about that. Hold on a second. Better read this part now.
Got her attention.
Yeah.
Looks good.
Okay. I thought it'd be a good idea to remind, because I think this is true of any governmental body, just to remind people that any of your written emails, your texts, or other things pertaining to PFC business are public records. Is everybody okay with putting that on there? It just I think is a good reminder. Okay, section 3. Any other changes under 3.1? The one that I went to the statute just to make sure it's current, because it was also in the book, is that actually the commission actually hires the chiefs. So I wanted to make sure that was clear. The statute, I looked it up and it still says that. And if you look at the book on page 39, or the old book, it's basically to take politics out of it, so the commission does the hire of the chiefs.
Or,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chad.
I was just going to say, if the established process for the city is that the deputy police chief assumes the duties of police chief until a new appointee is found, we should modify the title to reflect deputy police chief.
Yep.
Okay.
This would, fire would be in the same boat, correct? So if fire chief left, the deputy fire chief would assume the role in the time being. So, I mean, should we police and fire chief?
So that's typically how it would work, is with the next in succession, but ultimately it's a person that is appointed by the PFC. So it could be the third in line. For whatever reason, the deputy doesn't want to assume those duties. So I'm fine with keeping deputy in there. That is our current rank, second in line. But do you want to mandate that it has to be the deputy?
Is there strong? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think we may need to get some clarification on this whole process. I mean, I think Joe is right that regardless of who it is, it has to be approved by the PFC. Now, in the interim of a meeting, let's say, there's a vacancy that comes up on April 16th and the PFC just met on April 15th. Well, then the city's going to appoint second or a chief for the time being, but ultimately I think Joe is correct that the PFC is going to need to either confirm that appointment at their next meeting, or we'll need to make an alternate appointment.
I think you're right, Chad and Joel. Basically, we need to say, and I think we need to put a time limit on it so that it's clear.
I'll give you another example. In Menominee Falls right now, they're in the fire chief process, and they actually hired a consultant to do the administrative work of the department while they're in that search. So there might be a number of different options that the PFC wants to consider based on input from the city. But yeah, I'd just be careful of who you're committing to that position.
Should we just say, in the event of a vacancy, the city will establish a succession process until PFC approves, or something along those lines, where we don't identify a deputy then?
No, I think that's fine. Maybe the next in line, the succession for that temporary period until the PFC can meet. You're still going to want to have somebody in charge, because if during my untimely demise, I may not be able to appoint somebody or say that this person's in charge, you're going to want to have something in writing that specifies who that's going to be.
I think for some reason, Alexander Haig just jumped into my head. For those of you who don't know, he declared that he was in charge after Reagan was shot when he really wasn't. It's nice to have a clear, I think it's good to have something that's clear to know that if something were to happen to the chiefs, this is who's next, and everybody knows that that's who's next. But then that at the next meeting, that's when it's identified by the PFC who's acting or next in charge.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And maybe Chad, you remember, and Tom, but when the previous chief left, retired, the deputy chief was in charge until we hired the next chief. Do you remember? I don't remember, but maybe you do, how that process took place.
I think I could be wrong, but I think we took it up at a meeting that it was like, that's Deputy Chief Bates. It was known that he would be, after Chief Blotter left, be acting, and I think we may, at least I hope we did approve it. I assume we did. I don't specifically remember.
It has to be by statute. I think it has to be approved by the PFC. I mean, you guys have the ultimate authority there.
Right.
And I think you may also, I mean, really it's now being titled the interim chief in either department. I mean, it's basically being granted that interim title so that you're clear in your delineation that they're no longer the deputy chief, they're the interim chief of the respective department. And I think it should be clear that the PFC, and this may be something that the city attorney or whatever legal attorney is going to review this, is we specifically want to highlight this area for them to put in the appropriate language that will cover the short term between PFC meetings, but then also ensure that the PFC's statutory authority to make that permanent temporary assignment or interim assignment is captured there.
It's a good call. Any other thoughts or comments on that? But to work on that language. We got the concept.
Would it be possible to review the minutes, or when this was happening? How long ago was that? 2 years ago already?
It's been more than 2 years, I think.
We're talking for Chief Blotter. I think he announced his retirement around July of 2017, and I believe Don Bates became interim police chief around November of 17.
November 17.
Right. And you were hired in January?
Correct. I believe I was hired in January of 18.
That's what I thought I remember. So.
Okay, well, that area needs more work.
Yep. But I think what Chad said captures what I think we need to do, which is spell out both the short term and the long term and make sure it's reviewed and cleared. And I don't specifically remember what action we took to put Deputy Chief Bates as intern chief, but I know that that's in practical what we did or what happened.
Yeah.
I think in certain situations when it's announced, the existing chief can make a recommendation, but ultimately it's up to your approval.
Right. No, it's-
Maybe that's how it happened.
Okay, let me catch up to where we're at now.
We're at the, once a candidate or candidates are selected, the commission informs the mayor.
Right. And then that's where I put under 62.13 parent 3. That's where the commission makes the decision. Under 3.2.
Well, Tom, I think under 302, number 3, I think that's something we're really going to have to have a discussion on that may go even beyond this meeting. The way it reads, it seems like that the PFC does not, is basically, we're not the one kind of leading the recruitment process and hiring.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like I think we need to have a little bit more in there to, you know, pretty much articulate that the PFC oversees this whole process from beginning to end. And I think, you know, having some type of statements in there that kind of articulates that is important, because I think we got to show that, you know, the PFC is just not a rubber stamp for the police and fire chief.
I think that's a I'll agree with that. Are there other thoughts before I chime in?
I was just going to add, I do agree with Jim as well, and I know I should defer to the commission members, but before I forget this comment in my advancing age, I do think that perhaps it could say something along the lines of the Police and Fire Commission membership in consultation with city staff, including HR and the chiefs, will determine the components of the hiring processes, with approval ultimately determined by the Police and Fire Commission. Something along that lines may be the way to write that.
Anyone else? I'll if not, I'll chime in. First of all, when you talk about age, Chad, it's really unfair to you're aging. Anyways, the reason I put that in red, so Jim, I'd like to reinforce what you had said. And can I ask you to maybe work on that section a little more, or have some, because I agree with what your thought was. I had put in red there because I think we need to identify some of the clear procedures that we want to make sure, especially in light of the fact that we want to have the city and the department know that, hey, we're really looking at the most objective, the most equitable, the best way to get the best candidates, and everybody from the candidates to everybody that's you know, working or from outside looking at it says, oh yeah, that's a very good process. Because I think process is very important.
Oh yeah, and I would like to do it, of course, with input from Chad and Joe. So
okay, and Sarah.
And Sarah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sarah.
No, I was just going to say that I had put a comment on the side there that it seemed like we were just acquiescing our responsibilities on some level. That's what it makes it sound like. And that may be a little bit too strong language, but that's certainly what it sounded when I read it. That's what I read. And if we're going to post this online, and this is supposed to be a living document for people to absorb, I don't want them getting that idea. So I agree with basically what everybody was saying. So what I did do some review of the actual handbook, the hiring process. So it's pretty clear that the qualifications, unless you have optional powers, qualifications are not something that the PFC establishes. But the hiring process, actually, they have a very laid out step-by-step, essentially, things that we're supposed to be responsible for. Moreover, they even suggest specific items that should be in this section for hiring. So I think that we can actually use this document as a building block for doing that. And I guess I would also suggest that the 3.02, just the name of that probably is not sufficient either. I know that because it's not just the establishment of a list, but I think we should probably revisit what that is as well. I think that one of the reasons why I was excited about getting this book is it really does outline a fair bit of what I think we should have in this document. I sort of went through the first section of this and I just didn't get down to the section. I just started reading and then I ran out of time. But I don't know if we could just tackle this by all of us reading this section and taking another shot just at this section. I don't know the best way to approach that, or maybe just have a meeting specific about this. But I think this gets down to the guts of what we really are doing here. You know, like what is the process and how do we build that list out?
I agree with you, Jeff. And that's why I mentioned that I think it's going to take a lot more discussion to actually, break this down, because I read the book also, and there's a lot there that I would like to go over with Chad and Joel.
And, based on all those comments, because I want to make sure that we do this in a very transparent and a real, thoughtful manner. How about, Jim, if you work with, the chiefs and Sarah and do a draft that then can be, shared with, the rest of us to come off of, using the book as well as what Jeff, because then everybody gets to look at it and make adjustments.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
That after, I don't know if Sarah, you want to set up some type of meeting, through Zoom or whatever, and we can just, match your schedules and meet virtually or whatever you decide.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Is everybody okay with Jim and Sarah and the chiefs doing a first cut, or does somebody else? I suppose we don't have to worry about the notice and whatnot if we only had one other commissioner. If Jeff wanted to, or somebody else wanted to be in on that too, because again, it is then just draft. It's not a decision making. I
think that for efficiency's sake, if we can keep that group as small, I think that that's a great group. And I think having a draft format that we can all as commissioners go back and read this section out of the book. You guys can come up with a draft. I think that's an effective and efficient way of doing that. And then we can review that and we can make edits and we can have conversations surrounding that. One of the problems that this process has been, I think that it's been sort of not as efficient as it could have been because we didn't have the small sort of working groups. And I think that that's a very good idea. And I agree though that it's not a final product and that we'll all get input. Okay, let's do that. So Jim, you can set something up that works for you and Sarah and the chiefs.
Jim, I can work with you. I can set up a Zoom. So I'll be in contact with you maybe next week sometime or so. We can get the chiefs and you and I all together in a Zoom.
That works for me.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay. So we're still on section 3. Any other, or should we just let Jim do the full section 3? I would suggest that would be a good way to go about it. Okay, we'll do that. Do we want to tackle section 4? Probation? Under number 1, I had there 18 months. But that's on all new appointments as opposed to promotions, which are usually, what do you have for most of your promotions? A year or 6 months, Chad and Joe?
Chad just stepped away. There he is. Hey, Chad, what do you have for probationary period for promotions? Is it the same thing as a new employee?
I think the city removed those several years back.
Okay,
we
so
don't
you guys
have any-
follow us. I wasn't sure if you were under contract, if your CBA required anything for like a promotion to detective, for example, or, okay.
No, the city, I said, I think it was probably, I don't know, at least 5 years ago, maybe, that the city removed probationary periods for promotions. I think that's in handbook, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
We should research that. I think the commission can probably set it. I mean, just from state experience, senior managers, it was a 2-year probationary period, but it could be waived after 1 year.
But this is for the hired officers, or
Pardon, Rosa?
probation here is not for the promotions.
I think the problem that we have with probation with a promoted position is the fact that when we promote somebody into a position, we backfill their last position with somebody, we promote somebody. And now if that person doesn't necessarily want to stay in the, let's say, an administrative position, we don't always have a place to put them. So we got to be careful, because somebody who is promoted and we don't have a place to put them might actually, even though they're a good firefighter, might not have an eligible position to drop back to.
Question, I'm just saying there's probation for newly hired people, and there's maybe probation for people that are promoted within the rank. I believe that this one here, section 4, it's talking about newly hired people, and they do have a probationary period.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. You're right, Rosa. That is talking about new hires as opposed to section 5, which is promotion.
So if you're looking at new hires from the police department standpoint, the best way to probably say it is that the probationary period is established in the collective bargaining agreement with the Fitchburg Professional Police Officers Association, and may be extended by the Police and Fire Commission.
Yeah,
Extension below.
As I look at it, this was the issue that Greg brought up maybe
That's
15
there.
months ago. And I think what we could do is state, because I think what you want is the PFC and the contract to be on the same page, obviously. And I think, is it 18 months for a new employee?
For us, it's the probationary period ends 12 months from the date of the successful completion of the field training process.
Okay. So I'm wondering if we want to say that. What about in the fire service, Joe? What?
Typically, ours was 18 months because it reflected closely to what the police department was based on what Chad just said. Without knowing when those dates were, I think 18 months was the closest. I'm actually looking that up because I know it was a point of conversation before.
In 4.2, that's what we say, appointments will be consistent with the applicable collective bargaining contracts. I don't know if we need to be more specific than that, but it's included there. And it also, in 6, it also talks the chief could come to us to request an extension of the probationary period. So all that is included there.
Could we just take off number 1 then and just have the appointments will be consistent with the applicable collective bargaining contracts? Do we have to list out the specific probationary periods?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't list it. I wouldn't list it in 2 places. I'd list it once and refer to where it's listed. That way, when it's changed, it's changed once, and you don't have to worry about multiple documents.
So in other words, just make number 2 the number 1, and then you eliminated number one.
Yeah.
Can you
And-
guys see the edits I make as I'm making them, out of curiosity?
Yep.
Okay, there you go.
See them, I just want, could we have what was said before in number 1? You already deleted what was before?
Yeah, if you want, I can put it back. I'm trying to make updates as we move along, but if you want, I can leave. Do you want me to put it back in there?
Well, I just thought, because we're just, let's see what I want to say. It was already here about the collective bargaining. So what was wrong with the first one? It feels that we're not including the collective bargaining in the first one, but it's already in the second, number 2. So
Yeah, so I just undid all of the changes. So the first one just says all new appointments shall be probationary for a period of, and we get real specific, but the number 2 specifically states appointments will be consistent with the applicable collective bargaining contracts. I don't know if we can just, eliminate number 1 and then just have number 2 as our new number 1.
Number 1 can come out
just say
early.
all new appointments shall be for a probationary period, and then consistent with, or in the terminology, the applicable collective bargaining contracts.
Okay, and then take out number 1 is what you're suggesting?
Well, combine number 1 with 2, and then you have.
Yeah.
They mean the
Yeah.
same thing, no?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I do think it's not really the purview of what we do anyways, right? So, but it is establishing that there is a probationary period for officers, and that's established by the collective bargaining contract.
Okay, does that look okay, Rosa?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, we could get bogged down on that for quite some time, I know.
My question would be for the chief, is there anything in this section that is not done that way? Is there something there that's wrong?
So according to our collective bargaining agreement, newly hired full-time employees shall serve a probationary period of 18 months from the date of hire as an employee in the bargaining unit, provided, however, that any probationary period may be extended at the sole discretion of the employer for a period not to exceed 3 months.
And we have that, it's included there.
That's in the CDA.
Does it, Jody, would you repeat that? Does that say extension of 3 months, you said?
Not to exceed 3 months.
See, that's where I would, as a manager, or as the police and fire commissioner, I'd say, geez, there are some times that I would want to extend the probation 6 months.
So that's part of the CBA. That's a negotiable item. And that's not something that I can change.
Right. No, I understand that you as police chiefs or fire chiefs have to follow the collective bargaining agreement. This is the exact rub that Greg was raising, that who gets, the say on, how long a probationary period is. And his argument, in both are right. So somehow we've got to rectify this issue where maybe the collective bargaining agreements are also synced with what the PFC agrees with. I don't know. I mean, you can reach resolution on it, but I believe, just from my experience, that I would want extensions of probation up to 6 months, because the chiefs can always take it off. If somebody, I'm going to take you off of your.
So I think what we need to keep in mind is that anything that involves the collective bargaining agreement is going to involve their representation. And if there is something where they felt that somebody has been wronged, there is a grievance procedure. And that too will be presented appropriately. The other thing is, I think we need to be careful to try to identify all the variables. I mean, if this is somebody that was injured and is a good employee and they've established themselves already, but their injury is going to be more than 3 months, is that something that we take into account? If this is behavioral, and it continues for more than 3 months, do we expect that that's going to get any better, especially during their probationary period when they're supposed to be at their top, the top of their game? Those are the types of things that I think are good questions to ask, and I don't necessarily have the answers to.
So I have a question for Tom. Are you suggesting that we should have input as to how long that period should be?
Well, we're right now. We're kind of we're behind the 8 ball in that this stuff has already been established. I would have given the chiefs a little more. You know, I assume that was probably because in the collective bargaining, the union wanted it a very short period. And I would have given the chiefs more authority to, you know, their call if they wanted to extend it up to 6 months without going further. I'm just, I think we have to go with what the current collective bargaining is. There's no doubt about that, but I think somehow we want to set a process so that, you know, get back more control for the chiefs or management, from my perspective.
And my question is for the chiefs, have you had any problems with the time? Because I don't understand why we should get into changing that right now, unless someone expresses that there's a problem, there's not enough time. And I don't know the history of that. There might not be. And
Yeah, I kind of agree. And I don't know if we're on the same page, Rosa, but I think as far as probation and extending probation, I mean, that's up to the chiefs because they have the operational day-to-day control and they know actually what would be going on more than we would. So for us to, I think, to get into the probationary period, I don't think we really need to go there.
And I also just checked the CBA with the Police Officers Association. It also does indicate a 3-month extension. It does indicate that if somebody is on a period of leave, you know, to cover that situation that Joe mentioned where there might be somebody out due to injury, that the probationary period can be extended in the same duration as the leave. And from a history perspective, this obviously was raised. This question was raised when that was changed in the CBA with the Police Officers Association at the last contract. And as I recall, and I don't know if Sarah has the correspondence to support this, but as I recall, the city consulted with council on whether or not this was something of the PFC's purview, and council's determination was that probationary periods, since they are within the CBA, does not fall under the purview of the PFC.
Yeah, and I do still have that. I can send that out to everybody if you like. It was a legal opinion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that, but that was the one that Greg objected to. So, okay, well, I think we're not, it's already past 6.
well, my suggestion is with this one that I think we should leave it as
Okay.
consistent with the bargaining contracts and just leave it like that for now.
Well, that would go along then with what the council has said, the city council, so.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else on that?
Yeah, I just have one last thing. In regards to this topic, I agree about the collective bargaining, and I think that piece is not really under the purview of the council. Like, we can have debates about whether it should be longer or shorter, but it seems like that's been true. And you guys had said that there was precedence for that, and it had been the council had said, or council had said that. But do our purview here, I think, is when one of the chiefs determines that probationary period should be extended, they come to us and they ask for that to be extended. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not, we don't need to edit this right now because I think Tom wanted to end it at 6, but I think this section can be pretty short.
Okay.
And there is, we do have purview here. It's just that I think they can be pretty short and pretty efficient.
Okay.
And anytime we have any fluctuations in membership and whether we've taken any action from a disciplinary standpoint, you guys are advised and you're brought into the loop. more quickly than not.
Okay. So,
If I may,
go ahead.
Tom, just real quick.
Okay.
I think, and my understanding of this is that the commission has to approve an extension of probationary period beyond the standard probationary period. So I don't see that says that in number 5.
Right, and I guess that's kind of what I was driving at. I think it could be almost a two-liner. It could say something about the collective bargaining, just establishing that's where the probationary period is set, and then what our actual role in extending that probation is. And the chief comes to us, we extend it based on a conversation, yada, yada, yada. We have to come up with whatever that verbiage is, but I think it could be pretty short. I read the section pretty quick, but there's a section in the book as well that could probably lend some guidance to us. So.
Hey, Sarah, you're sharing your screen.
Yeah, you want to take that off, Sarah? Thank you.
Well, we have plenty of paper to write everything we need. So I like things more instead of trying to concise everything, more spelled out, because it's, for new members, it's good to have that guideline there. But if you have a suggestion that it's clear and it's concise, sure, by all means.
I think I heard I heard Jeff say that maybe we can just put this down to a couple of points. So, that being the collective bargaining, and then that it has to go to the commission if there's an extension. We can go with that. So, with that, our people, we would have another at least 2-3 sections. Should we take it up at the next meeting?
I guess what I would like is for the subgroup to get together, come up with a draft of that section, because I think that's the core of it, and we can plan a next meeting, maybe reviewing that, and then we can turn our attention down the road after that.
Okay.
I
We
agree.
still have to have the legal counsel and public look at this too, just so that before we make the final passage. So
Not final.
we'll plan on that, Jim, and let's see. Are there any announcements? If not, I'd like to make one. I'd like to announce that when we adjourn to thank Bronwyn's honor, in that this is her last meeting, and we truly appreciate. I see Jim clapping. Everybody's clapping. We truly appreciate your service, Bronwyn, and I know Sarah has a certificate. I obviously can't give it to you in person right now. And we'll have to figure out an appropriate way to do that. But thank you so much for all you've done on the commission. You've had very thoughtful comments over the years, and your input has really been appreciated. Anyone else want to chime in?
I'll chime in. First of all, I think it's one of those things that many people just take for granted is the thought, the effort, the time that goes into community service, and the unsung heroes that we see in our commissions and our committees really do. We really should be a lot more upfront and provide the recognition that is required. I do appreciate everything that you have brought to this commission. It gives us a great deal of satisfaction to know that as we proceed in providing public safety, we're doing it thoughtfully, we're doing it ethically, and we're doing it with the right input. So with that, thank you so much for everything that you have given to the city of Fitchburg and to the fire department specifically. I won't speak for the police department. There might be a law against that for fire chiefs to speak for police chiefs. So I'm going to let Chad talk about, the police department.
Thanks for the segue, Joe. Bronwyn, yes, I will also want to thank you very much for your service to the Police and Fire Commission and the city. Your level-headedness and your expertise from the legal perspective has always been appreciated. And it's going to be a different Police and Fire Commission without you. And again, thank you very much for your service. We appreciate it.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn in Bronwyn's honor.
Stand by. I have one announcement. I apologize, and I don't want to keep it going longer than it needs to be, but my thesis proposal is close to being approved, and I will forward that to Sarah. So if anybody is interested in what we were trying to get accomplished, I can tell you that the title of the thesis has pretty much been selected, but I'll let you guys read through that. And the reason why I'd like to forward it before its approval is if there's anything that you can offer that gives me a little bit more direction as far as what you do with. This is my favorite song. What we need to address, especially from a recruitment standpoint, if we are going to reflect the community that we serve, what does that look like and how do we get there? I'm trying to do what is ultimately as thoughtful as possible without having the intimate knowledge of communities where I've never lived. And that just sort of just makes sense to get as much input as possible.
Okay, we'll look forward to seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
Before we adjourn, I just want to thank everyone so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure to work with all of you. And I've been so impressed with the hard work and dedication to the city of Fitchburg and ensuring that the first responders have what they need. And it just has been a pleasure. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, we need one other quick announcement. I appreciate everyone being on for the meeting. This is a challenging time. Obviously, we're going to step up and do whatever we can to make sure that, the needs of the city and police and fire and citizens are met. So thank you, everyone. Is there a motion to, and stay safe, of course. That's one last comment. Somebody want to make the motion?
I'll make it.
Okay, Bronwyn. Okay, second.
Second.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. All in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
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 Yep, thank you. And then Sarah will look forward to what you send to Jim.